Our planet is a living planet and the only known celestial body to have both a fully functioning climate system and active plate tectonics. But all that moving and shaking makes the Earth a potentially dangerous place to call home. And natural disasters are an unfortunate but inevitable part of life for any species that calls our blue marble home. Evolving around 100,000 years ago, modern man has barely been around for but a blink of an eye in the Earth's history. And while we've been spared some of the greatest catastrophes to ever rock the planet, we've faced our share of natural disasters. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Infographic Show. Today we're taking a look at the worst natural disasters in human history. 10. With humans first settling large river valleys, floods have been one of our persistent woes throughout human history. Yet few floods have ever matched the devastation of the Central China flood, occurring across the span of Middle China in 1931, preceded by an abnormally heavy monsoon season that resulted in 9 cyclones in 1 month just prior to the flood. China was alternatively rocked by heavy drought and then extreme rainfall. This sudden rainfall led to the Yangtze, Yellow, and Huai rivers bursting their banks and flooding central China, killing millions of people and causing enormous property damage. Famous as the deadliest flood of the 20th century, the Central China flood killed an estimated 3.7 to 4 million people. 9. Egypt-Syria earthquake of 1202. The deadliest earthquake in recorded history. 13th century Egypt and Syria were rocked by a megaquake that led to a cascading cycle of disasters, such as floods, tsunamis, and then famine from devastated crops. Thought to have been caused by a geologic shift under the Dead Sea, the earthquake created a tsunami which led to extreme flooding. All in all, the string of disasters left over 1.1 million people dead in the region. 8. North Korea's arduous march. North Korea has a long history of rebranding its natural disasters, and few in its history were more devastating than the arduous march that began in 1994 and lasted for 4 years, nearly half a decade in length. The arduous march started as a famine, which was quickly exacerbated by a series of natural disasters. With its roots in ineffective government and the collapse of North Korea's patron state, the Soviet Union, natural disasters intensified the effects of the resulting famines, leading to over 500,000 deaths. Recently, North Korea has warned its citizens that another arduous march is incoming, and the world may soon see a repeat of one of the worst disasters in modern history. 7. Great Bengal Famine of 1770. Often at the whim of a precocious Mother Nature, humanity is no stranger to famines. Ruled by the British East India Company at the time, the Great Bengal Famine of 1770 struck territories in modern West Bengal, Bangladesh, Assam, Odisha, Bihar, and Jharkhand. A shortfall of crops in 1768 was a precursor to the disaster, but it was at the time nothing out of the ordinary. However, after the failure of the annual southeast monsoon, a severe drought gripped the area and crops failed across the region. Initial reports of starvation were largely ignored by the East India Company until mass starvation struck in 1770. A series of disease outbreaks and mismanagement by the British ultimately resulted in over 10 million deaths among the native population. 6. Chinese drought of 1876. Drought inevitably leads to famine, and no drought was deadlier than that which gripped China in 1876. A 3-year drought brought on by failure of regional monsoons devastated crops across the nation, leading to between 9 to 13 million deaths from starvation. Perhaps feeling guilty over their historical inaction in the face of catastrophe, the British actually organized a global relief effort organized by British missionary Timothy Richard, who established the Shandong Famine Relief Committee. Richard kept a detailed diary of the catastrophe and highlighted people eating the material of their own houses, selling wives and daughters in a bid to stay alive, and even dead children being boiled and eaten. 5. The 1918 flu pandemic. Disease is one of humanity's oldest foes, and few are more persistent than the seasonal flu. Yet taking hold amidst the destruction brought on by World War I, the 1918 flu pandemic would be the deadliest in history, infecting 500 million people and killing between 20 and 50 million of them. Yet the strain of flu responsible was no more virulent or deadly than the modern flu, and instead became deadly by ravaging a world population suffering from poor hygiene, concentrations of war casualty hospitals, and poor nutrition, all side effects of the First World War. First observed in Europe, it's unknown where exactly the flu started, but it quickly made its way around the world. In America alone, it dropped the life expectancy by a whopping 12 years. 4. Yellow River Flood. China is home to some of the world's mightiest rivers, and as a result is prone to the most catastrophic floods in history. Due to the elevated nature of the Yellow River, which runs along natural dikes that raise it above the plains that surround it, it is one of the most flood-prone rivers on Earth, a fact well known by the local Chinese, who for millennia reinforced the banks of the rivers with artificial dikes. Yet in 1887, after days of extremely heavy flooding, the Yellow River burst its banks, flooding large portions of eastern China and covering an estimated 50,000 square miles. The initial floods left 2 million people homeless, and the resulting famine and lack of essentials led to the death of an estimated 900,000 people. 3. 1556 Shaanxi earthquake. Drought, famine, and floods. It seems China really has it all when it comes to the worst of the worst. One of the deadliest earthquakes on record, the 1556 Shaanxi earthquake, struck on the morning of January 23rd during the Ming Dynasty. An area of 520 miles wide was completely flattened by the tremors, and an estimated 830,000 people died, with 60% of the region's population dying and absolute destruction in urban areas. The total cost of the earthquake is all but impossible to calculate. 2. 1970 Bola cyclone. It seems Asia is a rather unkind place to live, but thankfully we can leave China alone for the moment. Striking East Pakistan in India's West Bengal on November 12, 1970, the 1970 Bola cyclone is one of the worst storms the region has ever seen, and the deadliest storm in recorded history. Due to a severely inadequate early warning system in Pakistan, the total death toll is estimated to be as high as 500,000. Sadly, just after a duo of destructive cyclones in 1960, the Pakistan government had contacted the Americans for assistance in developing a national early warning system to help people evacuate. After a detailed study and subsequent report granted to Pakistani authorities by the director of America's National Hurricane Center, it was revealed that the Pakistani government did not carry out most of the recommendations given to them, leading to 1970's staggering death toll. 1. 576 Earthquake of Antioch. Striking ancient Syria. The earthquake of 576 AD in Antioch devastated the Byzantine Empire and all but completely leveled the city. The earthquake struck without warning on a morning between May 20th through the 29th and killed an estimated 250,000 people. Based on the severity of the destruction, scientists estimate that the earthquake was between a category 8 and 9 on the Mercalli intensity scale. The survivors of the initial earthquake then faced a massive fire which consumed all of the remaining standing buildings, nearly wiping out the city in its entirety. Emperor Justin I was reportedly so devastated by the news of the death toll that he entered the church in Constantinople without any of his holy symbols in an act of humility before God. A massive relief and rebuilding effort would see the city restored, but its inhabitants would forever be haunted by the death of 250,000 people. For as long as we remain on the earth, humanity will continue to see its fair share of natural disasters. Yet modern improvements in warning and alerting systems and international cooperation between nations to coordinate relief efforts has seen death tolls dramatically lower. Despite this, though, it's certain that humanity still lives on a dangerous world. And with bubbling supervolcanoes slumbering under Italy and Yellowstone in North America, the real worst natural disaster in history may not lie in our past, but in our immediate future, perhaps even as early as tomorrow.